You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. This week, I'm speaking to James Keyes, former CEO of two internationally recognized Fortune 500 companies, 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. Jim is not only a global business leader, but he's also a philanthropist, an educator, artist, musician, commercial pilot, and modern Renaissance man. His other business interests cover a broad range of industries from retail, consumer products, tech, healthcare, cybersecurity, and much, much more. He sits on several public company boards and serves as a board advisor to a venture capital firm, as well as a number of startups. Jim is a personification of the American dream. He came from humble beginnings and really credits a lifelong commitment to education for shaping his life and empowering him with the mindset to achieve great things. He was a founding director of the Dallas Education Foundation and is also the founder of the Education is Freedom Foundation. Jim has just released a new book called Education is Freedom, The Future is in Your Hands. We're going to talk about his new book. We're going to get his views on disruption and business transformation. And Jim is also going to dispel some of the myths about what went wrong at Blockbuster and, more importantly, what we can learn from its demise. I really love this conversation with Jim, and I'm sure you're going to get a ton of value from listening to him. So let's dive in. Jim, welcome to Retail Disrupted.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be with you.
It's such a pleasure to have you here on the show, Jim. I know we're going to talk a lot about your career and your time at Blockbuster and 7-Eleven, but maybe just to get us started, could you share a few words about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I have really been blessed with a fascinating journey. I guess I would have to characterize it as. Out of graduate school, I ended up with a major oil company, and I was a bit of a fish out of water because I wasn't an engineer, and yet it was tremendous learning experience. It turns out that was my open window to 7-Eleven. They had acquired a petroleum company to supply gasoline to 7-Eleven stores. And they needed a new team of people to come in and lead that exercise. And so I was brought in to lead a strategic planning function for that new division of the Southland Corporation, the parent company of 7-Eleven. And it turned out to be a great opportunity. Sometimes timing is very important in everyone's career. My timing ended up being perfect in that case because the PC had just been invented. So not only was I equipped with a set of tools coming from Columbia Graduate School of Business, but I also had the technology tool that no one had experienced. So I was able to run analyses, reports, things that would take normally weeks to do. I was able to do in a matter of minutes with this tool. It made me look like a genius, but it was really the technology that helped me. So from 7-Eleven, I ended up with went from great to catastrophic. We had done a leveraged buyout shortly after I arrived. And so this high-flying public company, New York Stock Exchange company, now was private with $4 billion of debt at between 16.5% and 17% interest, if you can imagine. And it was just a matter of time before that crushing weight of debt repayments ended up forcing the company into a Chapter 11 restructuring by 1991. So I thought my career there was probably over. It turns out it was the best thing that could have happened. And so a lot of what you'll hear in both my book and when I speak about opportunity, I coined the expression change equals opportunity because that really represented my whole career. Every time I would encounter some catastrophic change, inside the silver lining ended up being great, both professionally, personally, and for the company.
Jim, I'm glad you brought that up so early on in our conversation because it was one of the things I wanted to ask you. When I was doing my research for this conversation, I read that you didn't interpret the acronym CEO as Chief Executive Officer, but as you just called out, change equals opportunity. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that? How important is it for businesses to embrace change? And what's the risk of inaction?
It changes the essence of all commerce, if you think about it. And as much as people resist change, fear change, hate change, um, you know, it is ultimately all of business starts and ends with something changing and someone responding to that change and turning it into profitability. I have a favorite example, and I love your concept of retail disrupted. I'll give you a great example. I use this all the time, especially when I talk to young people about how fascinating retail can be. Um, think about the purest form of retail. You're walking down the street in New York City, blankets on the sidewalk, fake handbags. Probably someone from another country selling fake handbags and to tourists in New York. And all of a sudden, one drop of rain falls. What happens? Handbags disappear. Out come the umbrellas. That is retail. That is responding to the customer's needs real time. That is disruption in retail that causes change and creates commerce, creates opportunity, right? So if that guy on the streets of New York can respond so quickly to changing customers' needs, why can't Walmart or Target or 7-Eleven? Well, what happens is the bigger the organization, the bigger the company, the more inertia sets in and the slower the response is to a changing customer need. It's not real time. Our secret sauce at 7-Eleven was the use of technology. And this was, I wish I could say I invented this, but our Japanese licensee perfected the use of technology to have more immediate response to change because they had very small stores, very little inventory, no safety stock, and they had to be very precise in both the delivery of product just in time, but the availability of product regardless of the conditions, rain, shine, whatever. And they use technology to be able to be better at satisfying those customer needs than any of their competitors. That was response to change that created shareholder value in a huge way.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think here we are today in 2024, and we just sort of take technology for granted, and the fact that it enables retailers to become smarter, leaner, more efficient, and from a customer experience perspective, it makes our experiences more relevant, even more seamless, more personalized. So it's just kind of the way that we operate these days. But I want to ask you about Blockbuster. Something I talk about regularly with clients and in the media is this idea of retail Darwinism. So evolve or die, disrupt or be disrupted. And Blockbuster has become the poster child for what happens when you fail to adapt and when you stand still. One of the co founders of Netflix, Mark Randolph, said recently that Blockbuster learned its lesson too late. And if you're unwilling to disrupt yourself, there's always someone willing to disrupt your business for you. Now, Jim, you led the business in some of its final years. Would you say that's a fair assessment, or is the picture a little bit more nuanced than that?
The picture is far more nuanced and there's far more learning opportunity in the Blockbuster case than just attributing it to slow response to change, because it was not slow response to change. The change wasn't even really evolving yet. When I arrived in 2007, streaming was not yet, because of bandwidth um, limitations, streaming was really not yet available to the mainstream. There was a little bit of streaming, but heavy buffering, long time downloads, et cetera, et cetera. Netflix was doing DVDs by mail. Now, people give them a lot of credit. I give them a lot of credit for the disruption of DVDs by mail. That was great, but it was nothing that Blockbuster couldn't do and didn't do. And they did. They matched the same model, and they even had a competitive advantage because with Blockbuster by mail, if you didn't like the movie that you ordered a week ago or a few days ago, you could take it to the store and exchange it for something that you wanted to see. So it was absolutely an advantage, Blockbuster. They kept up with technology. The first thing I did when I arrived in 2007 was to buy a streaming video company, one that had superior offerings to Netflix, because Netflix was just thinking about streaming that didn't yet have an offer. We bought a company called Movie Link that had 3,000 titles already digitized, mostly newer releases. So again, advantage Blockbuster. What people forget is that we were positioned very, very well to compete with Netflix. We had something called Total Access, DVDs in store, by mail, kiosks, and a streaming video company that we renamed Blockbuster On Demand. So you might say, well, what happened then? Why did Netflix prevail? Well, what happened was the 2008 financial crisis and Lehman Brothers meltdown in September of 2008, right at the same time that we announced doubling of EBITDA, tripling of net income, and a solid competitive platform versus Netflix. But we had $1 billion of debt, a third of which was due in the year 2009. So again, change equals opportunity. What did that mean? It meant we had to be much more aggressive in finding a partner because of our balance sheet weaknesses. So we were talking with Google, with AT&T, we were talking with Dish Networks, we were talking with a number of strategic partners that were positioned very well to help make us the predominant aggregator, if you will, which doesn't exist today, complete aggregator of all streaming video. What happened was in the middle of this financial crisis, our studio partners got scared and basically pulled our credit terms from 90 days to cash. When one did, the next followed, and the next, and it was a domino effect. And it pretty much forced us into a restructuring. Again, not a catastrophic thing, because we were able to avoid a Chapter 7 complete liquidation, and we emerged from bankruptcy with a sale of the company to Dish. And Dish at that time was much better prepared with their distribution capabilities to compete for streaming video capabilities. Now, Dish then ultimately decided to go in a different direction. That was their choice. They wanted perfection. Bandwidth wasn't yet there. They had a better vision for the future. And you never know. Dish may one day relaunch a better version of Netflix. Who knows? I mean, of Blockbuster to compete with Netflix and others. But who knows? Point is, what appears on the surface is seldom what is reality. And there's far more learning in the Blockbuster case study than a simple matter of slowness to respond to change. It's a far more complex business challenge of cash management, balance sheet, debt, refinancings, financial market, macro environment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it sounds like it was the perfect storm then, because yeah, it is interesting hearing what you're saying, because Blockbuster did adapt. It did ride some pretty major waves of disruption, just transitioning from video to DVD, and then managing the whole Blu-ray versus high def debate. And then, as you say, you had your DVD by mail business. You went and eliminated late fees, which I'm sure made customers very happy, but I'm guessing that wasn't great for your bottom line at a time when you were already feeling the
Exactly.
financial pressure. So yeah, that's so interesting. Do you think it could have been saved?
I think it very well could have been saved. It was a question of fear, unfortunately. I talk a lot in my book about fear. I tell the Blockbuster story. And fear is a killer. It's a killer of individual careers, and it's a killer of corporations, because what happens is the uncertainty of what may happen causes people to be very conservative at times. And in a time of financial crisis, people worry about their job. They worry about what's going to happen. And the studios unfortunately reacted in a way uh, that really represented, I believed at the time, some irrational behavior, because they, for the long term, uh, killed the cash cow, if you will, because that rental window could have been sustained, that they had in the DVD world, could have been sustained in a far more profitable way in the streaming world had they been able to stay the course. Now, I'll take on the challenge as well of communications, because during a time of crisis, communication is critically important. Could I and should I have communicated more effectively with the studios to keep them on board? Yes. Uh, but hindsight's 2020. I didn't think they would panic and pull the plug and kill our credit terms.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's so interesting, and as you say, it's easy to say with hindsight. But I just want to touch on the one Blockbuster store that's still trading. It's in Oregon, and it's the last one standing. You walk through the door, and it's as if you're transported back in time. So the computers are from the '90s. There's still floppy disks. There's no internet. It's a totally analog experience. And it's become a global tourist destination, which is just fascinating to me. So you're getting, they're getting visitors from as far as Australia and South Korea. And there's a huge section of the store that's dedicated to selling Blockbuster merchandise. So, Jim, what does this tell us about the Blockbuster brand? And do you think do you think it could ever be revived in a more meaningful way or a more kind of fun and engaging way?
I do think it's clearly it's an iconic brand. And I had the privilege of leading two iconic brands we grew up with as young people. Friday night was a big Saturday night, big blockbuster night. You'd take a date there and pick a movie, and maybe stop at 7-Eleven on the way home to get some snacks to watch the movie. And so I really have a tremendous amount of affection from both of those brands. Do I believe the Blockbuster brand could come back? Yes, I do. There is still a gap in the market. Netflix, I have tremendous admiration for Reed and the team over there, what they've accomplished, tremendous success. But their business model has always been a bit challenged. Starting with DVDs by mail, it was a challenging business model, and it was somewhat limited. When they went to streaming, they had a very small library of mostly old movies. To put that into contrast, the Blockbuster store, 80% of the Blockbuster revenues came from new releases in the last 60 days. So the old movies were always popular, but most of the revenue came from the popularity of new releases. And Netflix didn't have those, still is challenged in many ways to be able to stream those. So they branched out and started making their own content. Well, that's great. But that's a very different business model. Now you're into creation with the studios and competing with the studios for creative content, which is a very different game and a very challenging game. To their credit, they've kept up. But what is in the future? There's no aggregator right now. There is no online player that can offer what Blockbuster offered, which is old movies, new movies, TV shows, anything you'd want to see, one simple shop. I called it convenient access to media entertainment, not unlike 7-Eleven, right? We were in the business of convenient access to media entertainment. That means all media entertainment. Now, no one yet has cracked the code on providing that solution. Will the Blockbuster brand ever come back? If they do, I hope that will be their challenge, that they want to be just like the store, the one stop shop, the most convenient place to get your favorite content.
Yeah, yeah, and I completely agree with you in terms of around having a strong emotional attachment to the brand because I remember going with my dad and my brother on a Friday night, just like you say, and going with them, picking out a movie, getting popcorn. There were no arguments when we got home about what movie we were going to watch. Not like now with my kids that have access to everything and there's too much choice. But it was just a nice, slower pace thing that you did, and I guess in some ways it's similar to Polaroid in that, Polaroid isn't just about taking pictures, but it is about making memories. And I think Blockbuster is similar. Now, just to shift gears a little bit, Jim, I want to ask you about diversification and this idea that you have to continuously evolve to ensure that you're staying relevant, to ensure that you don't go from disruptor to disrupted. And if you look at what all the big tech companies are doing now, they're really trying lots of weird and wonderful things. They're experimenting, they're failing fast, and when they fail, they tend to do it quietly. Amazon, for example, Amazon has a hair salon in London. TikTok is experimenting with pop-up shops. And Netflix opened a restaurant in LA last year. So, Jim, what do you make of this diversification? Do you think there's a risk of veering too far and potentially losing focus on your core business?
There's always a risk of veering too far, but I think, as you've said so well, adapt or die. You have to keep up with the changing needs of the customer, and they change all the time. So experimentation is the best possible way. I mean, you can sit around and hire a group of consultants and lock them in a room for 6 months and come up with what they think the customer will want, but there's nothing that compares to actually trying it, putting it on the street and seeing how the customer actually reacts. Not what they say, because what they say they'll do is often different, but how they actually react. I admire their efforts.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess at the same time, you still need to have focus because that's what I'm hearing. It just seems to be a recurring theme more now than probably ever before. Just all the retail leaders that I speak to here in the UK and the US and all around the world, it's just this idea that you have to know what your strengths are, you have to know what makes your brand special, how you differentiate from your rivals. What's your value proposition? What are you doing differently? And then you have to go and execute really well. So I wonder in your time as a retail CEO, how important was focus to you?
Focus is critically important. It's hard to maintain that focus with the organization. The bigger the organization, the more difficult it is. I call it big company disease because the bigger the company, the more layers of management, the more difficult it is to keep everybody on track. That's when the three things that I emphasize all the time, which is embracing change, having confidence to do something about it, and clarity of communications, both inbound and outbound. Those three elements are critically important for any company, but the bigger the company, they become even more important because inertia creeps in. Communications get bogged down and they get muddled and things get complex. And as a result, the response to change gets slowed. And that's where you see many companies begin, they have a life cycle like people. The company will rise, has a huge period of growth, then it peaks out, and then a lot of times it will decline and maybe even fail or go away unless they can keep that life cycle alive with innovation, with focus, a combination of the two. And those three things, I think, both embracing change but and having confidence to do something about it, but the clarity of communications is critically important, especially focus both on the core business and the future. Natalie, one last thing. This is one thing that people missed about the Blockbuster strategy. Everybody said, why aren't they just going straight to digital? Well, the reality is we had a huge business in physical and we had a massive number of stores, and those stores were underproducing. So we had to focus on that core business, improve the productivity. As you said, when they killed late fees, they killed $80 million of EBITDA almost overnight. And we had to replace that lost cash flow to be able to invest in the streaming business going forward. Now that's that necessary focus and a difficult balance between the core business and focusing on the future. Everyone's faced with it, but managing that balance is something that you almost have to block out the noise because the street, of course, all they cared about was digital. And yet, if you missed your earnings by a penny, you'd get crushed. So it was a bit of an inconsistent message coming from investors.
Yeah, the need for that clarity and that focus, but then also that need to have this, well, especially relevant today, this kind of culture of perpetual innovation and continuously evolving your offer and changing and following the customer. Now, Jim, I know you're no longer a retailer, but as a former CEO and also as a consumer, I wonder what you
Always a
make of
retailer.
always a retailer and always a consumer.
Always a
I wonder
retailer, yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm definitely going to ask you this question now. So, what do you make of retail today? Are there any particular technologies or innovations that you are excited about, or you think are making a difference to the shopping experience?
I had the privilege of working with Amazon back in the early days. I had partnered with, acquired from Tesco, the British retailer, a chain in California called Fresh and Easy. They were ready to shut it down, but we thought, well, let's see if we can do something with this. It was burning a ton of cash, and we didn't know if it was salvageable. But one of the efforts we made to try to save it was to go to Amazon and say they've installed uh, automated checkouts. But what a terribly clunky experience self checkout is today. It, some people
It
like
is,
it, but it's
yeah.
still very clunky. You bring up a bushel of grapes, now the whole thing, panics. If you've got a bottle of wine, now you have to call someone over. It's just very challenging. But I said, well, with Amazon, couldn't we have the ability to walk around the store just like we do in online and pull up an image of the, can't my phone recognize a product, and pull up the negative file on your system, and I just order it just the way I do online, and walk out of the store with it. Why can't I do that? And that led to what they have now called Amazon Go. Now it's still, I think, kind of clunky, the self service, because they have, I, I think, rather than simplifying it, they made it more complicated than it needed to be. They have shelves that are sensitive when you pick up all those kinds of things. We still aren't yet to the opportunity that all you have to do is take an image with your phone of a product, say yes, and the quantity, and walk out of the store. That will happen one day. And I think the use of technology for seamless transactions like that will be a tremendous benefit for retail. So I get excited about it. But I do have to share, there's one downside of technology. It's a mistake I see lots of retailers make. There's a tendency to say the computer is smarter than people. And arguably, with AI and with great algorithms, one can argue that that's sometimes the case. But retailing is such a tactile, real time, on the street, at point of sale experience, and conditions change constantly. So, that umbrella guy on the street of New York who is selling handbags and pulls out an umbrella when a drop of rain falls, the computer would have taken 2 days to figure out, or a day at least, to figure out, there's rain coming. Maybe you should sell some umbrellas. The retailer has eyes and ears, and they can see and feel a raindrop fall and change their strategy on the fly. So the ideal world is the combination of data that can come from technology and the eyes and ears of a retailer that knows their customer better than the computer will ever know their customer. You merge those two things and you've got the ultimate form of retail. That's what makes 7-Eleven Japan so wildly successful. They empowered the employee with technology and terrific decision making tools. They didn't take the technology out. So, what happened with Tesco? It came to the United States. I sat down with the chairman and said, what were you trying to accomplish? He said, we mirrored 7-Eleven Japan. We built a commissary, a fresh food distribution center. We had density of stores. We put state of the art technology in. I said, but guys, what you did is you used the technology to take the retailer out of retailing. And
Yeah.
that's a fundamental flaw that many, many make. They overuse technology and forget the importance of that person at the end of the day that curates the technology to make better and better decisions.
Yeah, that's always the worst thing a retailer can do is using tech for tech's sake. And I actually went out to California when those Fresh and Easy stores first opened. And at that, I mean, I've been living in the UK for 20 years, so I'm used to prepackaged fruit and veg, and then sandwiches, prepackaged sandwiches, and that sort of thing, self checkout. But I remember walking in and just thinking, Americans aren't Gonna love this. This has not been done with the local consumer in mind. And as you say, self checkout even today, all these years later, is still clunky. It's still not perfect. We're even seeing some retailers like Booths here in the UK rip out their self checkouts and go back to fully manned checkouts. I know in the US, there's a lot of retailers like Wegmans and Costco and Walmart scaling back, and obviously there's the whole it problem with it exacerbating retail theft. I mean, there's a lot of kind of issues at play, but I think it's so interesting to hear you talk to the blend of technology and marrying that with the human touch and empowering your store associates to make those decisions. And when they're equipped with the right tech, I mean, as you say, that's a really, really powerful combo. So super interesting. Okay, let's switch gears now and talk about your new book, Education is Freedom. The book was published in February this year. I can see, Jim, you are holding up a copy of the book, so I can tell you are ready to talk about it and share your many, many insights. So I will be including a link to the book in the show notes, of course, for our listeners. And Jim, let's get started. What is the book about, and what would you like readers to take away from it?
I think the key is right here. Not only is the title Education is Freedom important, because it's not education is about making money. And yes, making money is important, and it's a byproduct of our education. It's absolutely measurable, the difference between someone who graduates from college or graduate school versus just high school or drops out of high school. The return is there. In spite of fears over the cost, the return is there. So it is all about freedom versus just the income, because education gives you the opportunity to do anything you want to do. And most importantly, it gives you options. So if your choice of career, as with mine, wasn't great, oil industry, I wasn't sure I was going to compete effectively with my engineer peers, I was able to pivot and become a retailer. And my background was more suited, and I found it to be more fun. That was a direct result of education giving me that flexibility. But the other thing, that the subtitle is The Future is in Your Hands. What I mean by that is that literally, this is a portal to unlimited learning. We haven't yet really developed an appreciation, because the tools aren't yet perfected to be able to train online. Our education tools are a bit clunky. They're not integrated. We don't have incentives built in like we do in gamification. The graphics aren't yet eye-popping. Love Khan Academy is an example, but it's deadly dull. I believe Sal Khan is holed up somewhere developing the next iteration as we speak, and my guess is it will be a lot more engaging. There'll be a lot more gamification in it. So we're on the cusp of massive breakthroughs in the use of technology, even machine learning, to enhance human learning, because the machine learning can adapt the way it teaches to the way you learn best. And those possibilities are just unlimited. So I was a living example of the power of education throughout my career. And not just because I got a degree and a graduate degree. My wake-up call, and literally the origin of the title, was walking across campus at Columbia to go teach a class on leadership, and seeing a kid walk toward me with that t-shirt, that on his t-shirt, those three words. This is 25 years ago. And realizing, you know what? My degree was just a license to learn. My success hinges on continued learning. My ability to leadership is all about learning and adapting. There is no one leadership skill that works unless it's constant evolution of your leadership, because that's what counts. And so all of those learnings that I had about the importance of education, the importance of lifelong learning, the importance of technology to enhance our learning and our leadership skills and our ability to be an adaptable retailer, all of those learnings I tried to condense down into what would I tell my 20-year-old or 30-year-old self to say, here's the roadmap. You don't have to sweat this as much as you did, because there's a path here that makes sense, and it's what to learn, how to learn, and why to learn. Those are the things I've tried to capture as best I could in the book, with the mission of helping others achieve their full potential.
So what are your top tips for your 20 or 30-year-old self, or even for the next generation? Is it a case of good old-fashioned hard work and determination, or is it a case of finding your passion? For me, I mean, I definitely found my passion in what I do, and a day work doesn't feel like work, and I think that's when you found the right thing. So I guess, what advice do you have for today's young people?
Well, it literally is all of the above. Passion, determination, persistence. I've got an old Calvin Coolidge quote about press on, persistence, and determination are omnipotent. But I've really broken it down. I've written a chapter on each of these elements. I call it the C-suite learnings. And the what to learn is adaptation to change, confidence, clarity, the things I've described already. If you don't learn those early in your career, you'll never get to the next level, because they're critically important and they're career killers. Eliminating fear through knowledge is the number one uh, necessary thing to learn as you're progressing. The second, the how to learn, is something that, yes, we learn math, we learn science, but no one ever teaches us the importance of critical thinking, of curiosity. We're naturally curious as kids, but then over the years, maybe when mom says shut up after we keep asking why, right? Our curiosity wanes over time, but it's curiosity that leads to innovation. And then creativity, we tend to outsource creativity. Oh, let the marketing folks figure that stuff out. Well, no, creativity is everyone's job. Einstein called creativity intelligence having fun. And it's the essence of innovation. How can you innovate without invoking the right side of your brain, not just the technical side? So those are the how to learn things. And then the why. In my C-suite learnings, I wasn't going to include the why, and I had people remind me, Jimmy, you've got to tell people why this is important. Um, why is it important to go to college? Is it important today? Why is it important to learn? I broke it into, again, three things to just try to keep it simple and straightforward. But it's collaboration, because we live in a world with people, as much as we maybe think we can do it all ourselves, we really can't. And we have to rely on others. And the power of others makes us stronger and better if we leverage that power. How do you leverage that power? You've got to surround yourself with people that don't think and look and act just like you, or you'll never appeal to the broader community. So I call it cultural literacy. Staying away from the word diversity on purpose, because it's become so polarized, hard to imagine, because cultural literacy is a beautiful thing. The more I find people that are different, I will take away something from each of those people and make it part of me and make me stronger and better, because I'm going to learn from everyone that I encounter. And the more different they are, the more I can learn from them. So that's cultural literacy. And then it all comes down to the last C that I put in the book, which is character. It's that integrity, it's humility, it's gratitude. Those are the things that become our brand. And we all know the importance of brand, especially retailers do, right? Well, that character element is what people see and feel when they encounter us in the boardroom, in the store, on the street. And our brand is what will make us successful, make people choose to support us, follow us, work with us. So those are the last three. Those are the whys: collaboration, cultural literacy, and character, which come from experience. But I've tried to capture those experiences that built those three elements in the book. So maybe someone doesn't have to work for 40 years to build those things. Hopefully they'll get some tips from the book on how to develop their why.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to reading it. And I'm a big champion of social mobility. So it's just really fantastic to see all the work that you're doing with your foundation, and then, of course, with the book. And yeah, I'll be buying a copy here in London. Jim, just to bring it back to retail and business transformation, do you have any final words for leaders today who are navigating all of this disruption?
The book is intended to be a bit of a call to action for my peers, my fellow business people, because I believe we have a supply problem. Think about the number one resource need of all corporations. For some people, they might say, well, it's chips. We better build more factories, or it might be lithium for our batteries or whatever. I think the number one, bar none, critical important resource for all corporations is the human resource. And if we look at the statistics, the human resource capability, scores on math, reading, science are declining. College graduations, at least in the United States, maybe UK, declining versus many other countries. That will create a supply problem. We're the demand for an educated workforce. We are most of the demand for an educated workforce. The supply is declining. I see it as a crisis 20, 30 years down the road. And my call to action is for my fellow corporate citizens to step up and not see it as a state and local government or national government need, but a business need. Like any other supply crisis, what do? We fix it. And I think the technology is at our fingertips to invest in the technology to address transformation of education the same way we've transformed retail, automobiles, so many other industries. It's right there at our fingertips. The future is in your hands. And that's my call to action for fellow business people around the world.
Jim, it's been so nice to have you on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it. Great to be with you today.
Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.